Hey, welcome back to today's episode. I'm super excited to be here with Jenny Shafitz. And we've been chatting a little bit, having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're not going to let that stop us. So we're going to get right into it. Jenny, how are you?
Great. So happy to be here with you, Robin. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I just want to kind of get started. We've all heard a little bit of your intro, but I wanted to just kind of have you tell a little bit of your story and kind of how you have gotten to where you are today.
Fantastic. Well, like a lot of people, it's a long and winding road. I didn't come out of the womb knowing exactly what I wanted to do and finding my spot in adulthood, perfectly placed, with no bumps and bruises. Um, it's oof. I had to uh do a lot of trial and error
Yeah.
and try on a lot of different hats and play dress up and um and do a lot of things and uh have a lot of different experiences, um and get uh get hurt along the way, um to finally figure out what I wanted to do. And without giving your listeners, the long sordid story of, because we all have, big T, little T trauma, whatever that is we want to define. Um, we all have pain in our past, and it's what we decide to do with it.
Yes,
So
100%.
at I I at this date in time, here we are at the end of 2023. I am one of those people who can reflect back on the pandemic with through the lens of silver lining. And I used that time to work with a life coach, which I had never done before. I had never. I'm one of those people. I grew up with a lot of therapy. My parents were not afraid of that.
That's good.
So yeah, so I again had a lot of trauma in my past. So they weren't afraid of that. So I had experienced a lot of therapy in my history, but I had never done the life coach thing. And then all of a sudden during the pandemic, a life coach ad came across my social media feed. And I was like, oh, what's this all about? And it was a low ticket entry and virtual, obviously. So I entered into a short term group program, and that was the start of my latest personal growth journey, at that stage of my life. And, again, the long and winding road continued. And that program led to another, until I did a lot of work on my demons, air quote demons. I did a lot of work, a lot of discovery, a lot of healing. And one of the outcomes was me looking in the mirror saying, I want to do this. Huh. This.
That's all. Yeah, it's interesting because everybody starts someplace, right? Everybody starts on their journey most of the time not knowing what that actually is going to look like. And we have really no control as a young child because, we don't have the brain capacity or the experience or all of that. And so we grow up in this, in a time where we just kind of roll with it because that's what we just look at our parents and we roll with it because that's just how it goes, until you
Mm.
get a little bit older and you get a little wiser and you start to see how other people do things and how things feel. And you try them on, like you said, and you experiment with different things. And that's all part of life. It's all part of the journey. It's all part of the growth for each individual person. And number one, the fact that you are authentically telling your story without leaving any, giant, I'm sure, we're recapping the story, but you're not holding back. You're saying that you went to therapy as a child. You're saying that, you didn't have it all together necessarily, but who does, right? It's like
Right.
that quote, or the quota or stigma that, our society is like, you're supposed to have it all together when you're an adult. It's like, well, no, actually, that's not true. And so the more that people speak out about maybe what has happened to them, not, in so much detail, but just how stumble and fall and get up and stumble and fall and get up. And you have to keep going through that process until you get to the modality that kind of is the eye opener. And so for you, congratulations on taking that leap, having something cross and it felt right and resonated with you, that you were able to dive into that and just kind of see. And was that the end all be all? Absolutely not. That was probably like the very, the toe dip in to see like what life could be like in other ways when you work on yourself. Right. And so I love how that's led you to more continuous growth. And I know you have a coaching, business. And I think someone like you coaching other people is wonderful because you've got life experience. You're not somebody who hasn't lived it before. And I think that the respect of that is huge because, again, it's not that you know everything, but because you have wisdom and because you've tried on a bunch of different things, you have something so big to give to other people who are struggling, who need that assistance or guide or coach or whatever you want to actually call that. I know that you dabble in breath work, and I think that obviously that must have been a modality that you ran up against at some point, where it helped in some way. And so a lot of people are really unaware of what breath work actually is, and that it's actually a tool and a modality that can be used to better your health and wellness. So could you talk a little bit about what you do with breath work and how you kind of came into it and how it's helped not only you, but other people?
Sure. And thank you for what you said. I really appreciate that because it is funny how I'll say, I'm 48 years old and I feel like I'm on act 7, 9, 12. And it is kind of hilarious because I tongue in cheek will say I'm very highly educated
Sure.
and I had a food truck for a while and it was almost comical because there was a couple $100,000 down the toilet that because I'm making cookies that I did not need any of that education to do, but thank you parents for spending all that money. So the breath work is wonderful. It is an incredible modality, and again, I will admit that I came upon it through, here I'll say it, FOMO. Okay, so I was in my life coaching certification, and which I entered into full cannonball. Like that was me, like full heart. I'm completely in this to win it. My certification coach, that instructor, also offered breathwork certification. And so I'm in this big program, couple hundred people, many of whom were already breathwork certified. And so she's offering now the next course, which started mid-program. So I'm, she's pitching this, saying, okay, the next cohort of breathwork, and all of these people, some of them were already breathwork certified, saying, oh yeah, you guys should do it. This is so wonderful. So all these people are signing up, and I'm on the fence saying, do I do this also? Like, this is a great opportunity. And of course there was a financial incentive because, if you're already in the coaching program, do you do, okay. And it's, this is during pandemic. So I'm home. There's time on my hands. Sure, my kids were homeschooling. It's not as if nobody's doing anything at the time, but I'm home. Okay, no. I mean, yes, I had been exposed to breath work at this point. It was a part of my coaching program. So I had felt some of the benefits, but Was I all in? No, I'll admit that. There was an element of FOMO and feeling like, well, there's this financial incentive. There was a discount.
Hmm.
So yeah, I jumped in because it was there. It was available to me. And I felt like I'll add this to my toolbox. This is something I can offer my clients. And sure, there are benefits to me because it is another modality I can access for myself. And here's the thing. While I'm doing it, just like when you're doing something good for yourself, I mean, if you're going to start eating better just because your friends are doing it or just because your husband decides to eat better, yes, you can be doing it for the other person, but all the while, it's going to benefit you. You can do it for someone else, but as a byproduct, it's going to help you. So, yes, I was doing it to add to my credentials, but I wasn't immune to the benefits.
Correct. And it's funny because I think a lot of times when we are trying something on for a variety of reasons, we may not be connecting the goodness we're going to be able to get out of it. And I think that happens a lot. We start doing something like, oh, I'm just going to do it, or the FOMO, or it's discounted, or whatever it is that kind of gets you there. And you really don't even know what you're going to actually walk away. And you walk away with something completely different. And I can relate to that because when I did Kathy Heller's Abundant Ever After, I really didn't even know I signed up for it. And then when it was starting the free boot camp, it was like, oh, jump on or whatever. And I was like, oh, well, I'm sitting here with my mom. I might as well make use of my time. And it was like after that first day of being in her presence, I was like, well, this must be a God thing because I didn't even know how I signed up for it. I signed up for it somehow. I'm here. And at that point, I still didn't even know what I was going to get from it. That course forever changed
Right.
a lot of my being because of the way she teaches and because of what she says. And to be quite honest, I walked away with a million times more than what I thought I was going in for. So I think that happens sometimes. And I think that's this, like the sweet spot, the serendipity, whatever you want to call it. It's like, it's just being in the right place at the right time and not knowing the surprise you're going to get, I guess. So
Right.
with breath work, do you practice a particular type? Are you more partial to one? Do you use different breath work practices for different types of things?
Yes, all of it. So I am partial to just using it to calm down. I mean, that's
Sure.
some people, there are different patterns for different purposes.
Okay.
So if your default behavior or your nervous system being is low, your state is normally more of a depressed state, then you would want a pattern to lift you, energize you. If your state is more and so that's one way. If your nervous system is more like high anxiety, then you would use a pattern to lower. That would, different breath patterns. It's all intention based. That's breath work that you would enter a session for. If you're just sitting, if you're ticked off in traffic, you were just cut off, or your just feelings are frustration. You just got off the phone with someone that aggravated you, or you're running through your checklist, your to-do list, and you're at a red light, and that's just all you're focused on. You could be sitting at a red light, just taking some deep, mindful breaths. That's breath work, and people aren't even realizing they're doing it. If you're just taking, 3, 5, 10 deep breaths and doing it with intention, that's kind of your entry point to breath work. A session is going to be more involved. You're going to be led through different patterns. There's going to be mantras and cueing and visualization involved, and perhaps different patterns with flow, choreography, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I'll do it in the shower, really, is a time where, because I'm focused, that's time where I'm by myself.
Right.
It's time where I have time. I know I'm alone for 5, 6, 7 minutes, maybe more if I'm lucky. I will intentionally, maybe put my hands. I have, a couple walls for my shower. I, can put my hands on the surface, focus my attention on the solid surface. I will bring my attention to how the water feels, the scent that's coming off the soap or the shampoo, and just really thinking about what's going on in my head. Yeah. And allowing the thoughts, not judging, not berating myself, but just being.
Well, I think it's such an interesting example, because as you were saying that, it's like most people shower every day, right? For the most part, once or twice. But how often can you remember what your shower was like? Nobody does, because it's like you're just running through it as fast as you can to get out to do something next. Now, I am a huge believer of habit stacking, and like when you're oil pulling, doing it in the shower, because it's, it's something you're already doing, so you're not having to separate it out and spend more time. But it is interesting, because I do think, because of our fast-paced life and the nonstop rap tape in the head, we don't really take easy things to be intentional about. We wait until we're either, sitting on your yoga mat, or waiting till you're, so frustrated you're taking whatever it is. But it's like in those mundane times is where we need to start the practice of being intentional. And the breathwork is free, guys. Like, it's something that everybody can do. It doesn't cost a dime, but a breathwork session is a little bit different, because that is something that you're using as a modality or a tool to work through things. And you learn from somebody else who has the experience, but then you take that experience away, and then it's free for the rest of your life. So it's really how you look at that. And when I hear people say, I don't know how to do breath work, or breathing doesn't work for me, or stuff, but one thing to remember is there's all kinds of different modalities of breath work, breathing. I thought it was cool how you just said, if you're feeling low, there's breath work patterns to bring you up, and vice versa. Now, I know a lot about if you're up and you need to come down, but could you give me one pattern for someone who might be in a lower state of vibration that really needs to kind of raise up during the day? What is it? Fast breathing is what I'm kind of envisioning, but I don't know.
Sure. Also, if you, so most of us, so I'm a big fan of, I'm trying to think of how to, if you put a hand, it's, so your listeners can try to feel their way through this. If you, it would just be using the mouth. So most of the time in breath work, we do want to encourage nose breathing, because that is how we can get a deeper breath, is, that big inhale. It's so cleansing. But this pattern is all mouth.
Okay.
And it is invigorating, and it can be hard because we're not used to doing this. It's all mouth, and you want to focus on the exhale. So the inhale is going to happen passively, because you're not focused on it. So you want to focus on blowing out, and keep the shoulders down, and you're going to almost feel like you're doing a little crunch.
Okay.
So if you're sitting in your chair, it's going to feel like a little bit of an ab crunch, and you're focusing on blowing out. So you're going to go. So you're not focused on inhaling, just focus on the exhale. Almost imagine like you're going down like a whole row of candles. Like,
okay.
And blowing them out one at a time. That can be like invigorating. If you were to start your day, if that, not that you need to start your day that way, but if you're just feeling like, oh, I'm kind of down in the dumps, that can be a lifting. That can be a lifting.
I mean, pattern. I can kind of imagine, because it kind of gets your blood flowing. It kind of pumps you up a little bit. Whereas the deeper breaths kind of expand your lungs and kind of bring down.
Right. Whereas like if I'm feeling just kind of like high anxiety, I want to take that big inhale, exhale, and bring myself grounded, like I'm kind of rounding down into my chair.
Yeah.
But that blow breath, it can lead to a little bit of lightheadedness. So you don't want to do that for a long period. So you might, set a timer for, 10, 15 seconds, or you might count that even. You might count how many breaths you do, because that's going to be a shock to the system if you're not used to it. Yeah. I'll include that in a song, and I might, for a more experienced breather, I might do that for the chorus. So that in choreography might be, the 30-second chorus of a song. Then we'll go back into, an inhale to exhale. And then we'll do that blow breath for the chorus.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. So I like that, how you can incorporate that into driving while you're listening to something. I never thought of that. I like that.
Yeah. So I wouldn't do that blow for 4 or 5 minutes straight. That would be intense. That would be too much.
Got it.
But I would be able to do that for 30 seconds.
Sure. But if you're just starting out, if you're listening and you've never done that before and you want to try it out, 10 seconds. Right.
Yeah.
To get started. So how do you incorporate, I know you do life coaching and the breath work kind of comes together, but then you have this whole other like sideline sister. I know you're like a huge sports fanatic. That's definitely what I know about you. Yes. So do you merge those two things together? Do you work with parents of children that are like athletes, or is it kind of all over?
Yeah. So the Sideline Sisters podcast and Facebook group, that is a place for fun. That's a place for the podcast. I'm interviewing people who in all realms of sports, and some of that is heavy or deeper into aspects of sports that could be mental health related. The Facebook group is a place for anyone who loves sports, anyone, sports moms, anyone with an interest in sports. The way that this merges or marries with my coaching business is there are so many people who are involved in sports, either as parents, athletes, fans, who get worked up.
True.
From a fan perspective, you could be all in, and it could ruin your day.
For sure.
Could, especially if you're betting on it. You could be very involved, and it could definitely impact your world. As a mom, certainly it's impacting your family.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Any parent of an athlete knows that it's serious business. And, if you're a player, even if you're an adult, I mean, I played adult rec league tennis, and it was way more serious than I ever imagined it would be. Um, that I expected to take on at this stage of my life. So adults need support, and moms should not be setting aside these feelings, these burdens, thinking my child is an athlete, they need the training, they need the nutrition, they need the camps and the gear. So I'm going to put all my energy there, and I'll just suffer through it, and I'll drive them around and make them the meals and get them the equipment, and I'll watch my marriage crumble, and I'll watch, I'll suffer through it and sit in the car and work on my laptop and wait until they graduate, and then I'll figure things out.
So I love how you're talking about that, because I see that so often. And I think a lot of it is a social norm that has been created that is really not healthy. And as parents, we also feel the pressure from the sports head person or whoever is on the league, or whoever, is. My kids were not in sports, but my daughter was in dance, and it was serious business. We never pushed her. We were definitely not the family that was like, you must excel, you must do this, because I had seen before her experiences of that with not just dance, but in other things where it's just not healthy. And so, I get being competitive to a certain degree, but the amount of stress that are put on these kids for every little thing that they do, sometimes you just want to go have fun. Sometimes you just want to go, and so my thing to my daughter was always like, just leave it on, just have fun, go out, leave it on the dance floor. If you have a gift of dance and you have a gift of talent, it will just shine through on its own. You don't have to freak out and, do all these things that these other kids are doing, unless you really want to. If it's a passion of yours, if you really feel like it's benefiting you, then we'll obviously support you. But when you do have a natural talent, you are seeked out and you are quickly brought up the chain, and then it becomes real pressure. And there's got to be a better balance, I feel like. And parents get caught up in it because somebody's telling them that if their kid's going to make it, they got to do all these things, and it's just like, what happened to the rec league, right? Like, what happened to just playing in high school and not being on a club team? Or it's like, so, and again, every child's different and everybody's abilities are different and everybody's wants and desires. And it's like, you just have to talk to your kids and let it be their choice. But that doesn't mean as a parent, you should neglect yourself. And I find a lot of times, especially where I'm at now in life, when you are a parent of an athlete, when you are a parent of somebody and you have poured, the last 7 years of your life and really forgotten about you, when they go off to college, whether they're playing a sport or not, or they go off to, not college, but just do the performance, whatever. If you're in dance, you don't necessarily have to go to college, but you go to LA, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, all of a sudden you're just dropped flat on your face, pretty much, if that's what it feels like. And I experienced this earlier on because my daughter chose to stop dancing after a certain grade. And so that, for me, that screeching halt came sooner than the empty nest phase. But I feel like a lot of moms come into that, what am I going to do with myself now? Because I don't know how to care for myself because I haven't done it in so long. And so that, I love those pocket of people, because I feel like as moms and women, we should be supporting each other. And you're right, a life coach, if that is the area in which you want to work on, I do integrative health, stuff, which is a little bit of a lot of things. It's more foundational. So it's really just deciding for yourself what makes the most sense for where you're at in life. But one of the things is, giving yourself some space. And if you walk away from this podcast getting nothing else this episode, if you have a child in sports, please do something a few times a week for yourself, where you block out all other things and just focus on yourself, whether it's self-care, whether it's movement, whether it's talking to a life coach, whether it's figuring out breath work. Do something for yourself now before you get to that phase of life where you feel more lost. Start wherever you are, basically. So
Right.
I love that. And I love how you focus. I love how you are a lover of sports. And I am not all sports, but I am a college. I love Florida State. And what happened over the weekend was a bunch of baloney. Just putting it out there. But that right there, what had happened over the weekend, I don't know if you watched it or if you're into that kind of stuff, but they had a 11-0 season. They didn't lose a game. Yet they were their quarterback got injured a couple of season or games ago. So then they had a second string come in. And then this last game, there was a third string that had to come in. And we still ended up winning.
Oh, wow.
And they did not make it to the national championship. And it's all because of ESPN, because of money, because the SEC has some, whatever. And that right there is so sad for the athletes, those seniors that are on that team, that, the whole team is not your quarterback. Your whole team is your team. And that's what teamwork is all about. And the fact that you were able to still pull out the wins. And, they keep bad mouthing like, oh, you didn't play anybody this season, or, oh, it's like, doesn't make a difference who we played. That was the lineup for us, and so that I think was really awful. And then what message does that send? What's the message that's sent to the kids? You work hard and you're still going to get duped because the dollar isn't there. So right. Again, moms, if you have athletic children, life is not fair. And so right. You've got to explain that to them earlier on, but then also it's not fair as far as, you neglecting yourselves either. So it's like, you've got to create balance.
Yeah.
So,
and when there's that kind of stress in the household after a game like that,
sure.
What tools is everyone using to manage that kind of pressure that's coming?
Yeah.
Into those
because that's actually,
walls.
I mean, that's such a good point too, because there are a lot of households that probably would do better if they had some type of tools. You're right. After a letdown or even after a victory, it's like there are tools to use to make sure that you don't have an up or a down. You still kind of stay, even keeled.
Yeah. Because the expectations are huge.
They are. I wish they weren't, though. I wish that it was a little bit different. And I hope in the next decade or so, things start to kind of shift and shake out a little bit, because I feel like the fun is lost sometimes when there's so much pressure like that. And the children are not like the naturally athletic children are amazing, but if they're not having fun and all it is stress, I just think it ruins it for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I often find myself telling people, let's remember the word that used to come before the word sports. It used to be play.
Yeah.
What do we do with sports? We play sports.
Yeah.
And that's lost on so many student athletes. They're not playing anymore. They're working sports.
Interesting. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, they're out there doing a job before, the Patriots, their motto is do your job. Okay, yes, for them it is their job.
Right, because they are getting paid, and they're getting paid a lot of money, an absorbent amount of money to do their job.
Yeah, but student athletes, it's not their job yet. They should be playing. And when they start feeling that enormous pressure at such a young age, that's why a fellow podcast classmate of ours, Kirsten Jones, who has...
I love that. Yeah, I like her podcast.
Who has her other podcast and wrote a book. She taught me that the burnout age among student athletes, the average age is 12.
Yeah.
I mean, that's horrifying.
It is horrifying, because it's like, how are you ever going to get up to but it's true though. And I think probably in my years of parenting, I have definitely seen that number shift up and tick up. Um, so I don't know, it's kind of sad, but I think that, again, having the right tools in place and having parents have those tools is
Right.
really key. And so, again, if you're someone listening to this podcast episode and you're a parent of an athlete, just ask yourself, like, what tools do I have to help my children manage what is happening, within their sports dynamic?
Yeah.
And having that conversation and hearing your children, listening to your children, I think is big too. And allowing your children to have the journey and you're just sort of along for the ride rather than you navigating the journey for them.
And we know as parents that we are our kids' biggest influence.
Sure.
So if our kids truly love the sport and want to continue playing their game, their chosen avenue, then it's up to us to manage our emotions. And so if we're not the best at it, and we need to be the one booking the trips, booking the travel, driving the carpools, going to practice, packing those snacks, buying the gear, doing all of the stuff that we need to do as their tour guide, travel agent, parent, right, chaperone, nutritionist, all the things that we need to do as their mom, then we best get our mental health under control, a la breathwork and life coaching and all the things that I would suggest with me. Then we model for them how to manage our emotions, our pressure, our nervous system, so that when they come home from a bad loss, or they're coming back from an injury, or they're coming back from the coach didn't play me, the coach benched me, all the team dynamic baloney, they got in an argument with the captain, or all that stuff. They have the tools to handle it because you, the mom, are sharing it with them.
And one other thing, like when you were talking about like the chaperone, the driver, the agent, all the things, it's one of the things I didn't do earlier on when she was super little, but as she got more in the middle school years, is allowed her to also navigate some of that. So it's like we would sit down and write, if we were traveling, what are the meals or the snacks that we're going to be eating, or, how do we book a flight? Because it's important. I mean, there's going to come a time where you're not going to be doing it for them. So, we would, I wouldn't say make it fun, but, we would just, let's look at, this is why we're going to do this. And this is why we're staying here. And then it got to a point where, at these dance conventions, there's always Starbucks, of course, but it was just like, do you know how much money we spend in a weekend when we go do something like this? And it wasn't to make her feel bad. And it was really just to show her, like, we can do all of these things, but you're going to get $50. And that $50 can be for X, Y, and Z, including merchandise. So you have to decide how you want to spend that. And I did that because she needed to understand the value of a dollar, first of all. And also, if she started going on her own, she would need to know how to manage her money at a younger age. And so that was exciting and interesting all at the same time. And it was definitely a learning curve, but I think she's better with her money now at 17 because of that. Whereas her sister just, she burns through her money like $1. Where can I spend that $1? Like, so
financial planner. That's usually another one I add to the list of jobs that that sports mom
it's
has.
Life, really. It's life. It's life in sports, but it's also life after sports, because these are all things that you have to know how to do in different ways, when you become an adult or adultish or even in college. So, but I think the one thing that everybody should basically walk away from this conversation with, whether you have an athlete or you don't, if you have children, what you model, what you take on yourself is the model for your children to see. And so if you do these things for yourself, then as your children grow, they are not only going to get the tools from you, but they're also going to know to work on themselves. And I think that's the most important thing, because as a parent, I always tell my children, I do not have all the answers. There are people that are experts in lots of different things. And so my job is to teach you how to find those people, because I don't know where they all are either, but it's like, how do we find them? We need to look. And so, and you get referrals or references, and you have a conversation with the person that you might hire to do something for you, to make sure that it resonates with both of you, because you don't just go to somebody because somebody told you to go there. It's like we often, again, I think a societal thing is you just hire somebody and then you expect that they know what you want them to do. And there's a lot of, so I'm trying very hard to teach my children to have those kind of discovery calls, or whatever you want to call them, interviewing process, so that you make sure you pick the person that's most aligned with the tools that you're searching for.
Yeah.
So, well, I love this conversation, because not only do we talk about life coaching and breath work, but of course the sports thing is huge. A sports lover, a sports player. And also I think arts are sports, because whether you're in band or dance or, something, it still has the same mold of pressure and rising to the top, and where you're going to go with it, and what are you going to do with it, and all the things. So
committing to something.
Yeah, committing. I like that. So, and what does that commitment come with? I think that's a good conversation too. So, thank you for sharing your vision and what you've learned through your journey. Because like you said, all of the ups and the downs in your journey has brought you where you are today. And now you are more equipped to work with parents and adults, and people who need that life coaching style, that maybe have never had it in their life just yet. So thank you again for coming on and explaining all of that. But before we end, I always like to ask all of my women, or people, I guess not always women, but people who I have on to interview, a couple of your non-negotiables. So through your life, you've shifted and you've grown, and you've created different modalities, non-negotiables. I call them 1% shifts that create into your non-negotiables to have the healthiest, most balanced, most vibrant life. So what are a couple of things that, Jenny, you do every day to keep yourself, well balanced?
Boy. Okay. Well, non-negotiables. And this took a long time for me to learn how to do, is I eat what I want. I don't diet. So I listen to what my body, I eat what I want. That's not like raiding a convenience store, but so that's kind of a non-negotiable for me, is if I want something, I eat it.
And you don't feel guilty, and you don't pass judgment. You don't do all that.
Correct. Yes. Sleep is a non-negotiable. I do not, my kids are old enough that I'm not one of those people that waits up if my kids aren't home. I'm not that person. I will send a text I will send a text if my child is at a friend's house, and say, I hope you're coming home soon. I'm going to bed. Drive safely. But sleep is really important to me. So I make sure I get enough of it. So I get outside when I want to, but I don't. Guilt. That's probably a non-negotiable, is I don't feel guilty. I don't make myself.
And that is not a learned behavior. That is something that you really have to work on, is to get rid of the guilt that comes along with having your own intuition speak loud enough to have you do certain things. And I think that only comes with age and wisdom.
Yes, that was a huge part of my um life coach
Work.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, the deep dive that I did that started during the pandemic is breaking those patterns, the conditioning, the programming, whichever word we want to attach to it.
Sure.
I broke all of that, and that's probably the biggest, not the like little behaviors, those day-to-day behaviors, but the biggest thing is I probably do not feel guilty for the choices that I make on a day-to-day basis. So if I am sitting in front of the TV when my husband comes home from work, I don't feel guilty about that. If I didn't make dinner, I don't feel guilty about that. I don't feel guilty for
That's good.
things.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that, again, I think that's a hard one to um, reframe sometimes for some people. But when you actually do, it just relieves a lot of stress. It really
Yeah.
just lifts a huge weight, because we feel like the reframing comes in because we feel like we're going to be letting someone down if we're not doing what we've been conditioned to think that we should be doing. And so when we're not doing that, we feel a sense of someone's going to be unhappy, judge us, whatever those negative things
Yeah.
are. And so the guilt comes in, like, if I don't do this, this is what it's going to feel like. But in actuality, that is not always truth. And if it is, it's just talking with that person and communicating, hey, I had a rough day. I just want to give you a heads up, dinner
Yeah.
won't be done because it's
Right.
just
Right.
not in my power at this moment. It's like, it's not just like you're sitting on the couch eating bonbons
Oh,
doing
sure,
nothing.
sure. Right. Right. I always stipulate that. I mean, I'll help you fix something. It's not like I've left the house devoid of food, but
Yes. No, I hear
yeah.
you. And I think again, when you speak up and you talk to your family and you let them know, like, this is the kind of day that I had and I'm just literally spent,
Yeah.
then they're able to see where you're actually coming from. And it's like, it's not because I don't love you. It's not because I don't respect you. It's not because of all of those things. I am just where I am at. And so I need the space and the understanding to allow me to have that space. And then I'll be fine, the next day or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
so that's huge. So if you're
Yeah.
somebody who struggles with, the guilty mind or needs reframing, that's kind of what life coaching, that is what's in store in that program. It is
Yeah.
about reframing and kind of getting your life to a point where you are satisfied, you are happy, and you are thriving. And you've busted out some of the old patterns of thinking and things like that. So
Yeah. It's way more than a 1% shift to get rid of guilt, and that's tied to getting rid of guilt is tied completely to worthiness for me.
sure.
Is I've
And
I've realized I'm worthy of not feeling guilty, and
sure.
I deserve to sit on the couch some days and not make dinner, and I get to watch TV, and maybe I do get to have a bonbon. I don't know.
Maybe. And again, I think guilt for people is tied to different emotions and different things. And it's about, and you're right. None of the changes, none of the non-negotiables, none of that comes from a 1% shift. It comes from these small 1% that over time mount up. But you have to start somewhere, and to start with less overwhelm. That's the whole idea of the 1% shift, is that,
Oh,
maybe
certainly.
you're not saying I'm not making dinner tonight, but maybe you're saying, I need help with dinner tonight because I'm
Yeah.
just, I'm overwhelmed or whatever. So, and
And
using
if you
your
got and if you got a good night's sleep, it'll be
true.
easier to speak up for yourself.
That's true. I think finding your voice is a huge one for a lot of people. So anyways, this was a lovely
Yeah.
conversation. I love all the different things we got to talk about. And if you are looking for someone, obviously I will drop everything in the show notes for where you can find Jenny and the Sideline Sisters. You can listen to her podcast and her on social media and all the things. So just look in the show notes. And until next time, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And thanks again, Jenny, for coming on.
Thanks, Robin.